So I guess we should start.
Okay. So yeah,
Okay. Should we start then?
so just a minute.
Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to this exciting session jointly organized by ProdCon, the Product and Consulting Club of NIT Bhopal, and ICON, the Consulting Club of IIM Bangalore. So today's session is going to be really insightful for all those who are preparing for consulting and looking for management roles, especially for case studies and guesstimates. And I'm so glad to share with you all that we have two amazing personalities with us from IIM Bangalore, and they're gonna help us with their experiences, learnings, and tips, which is really gonna help us all. So we'll start with our speaker of the session, Mr. Tapish Gupta, who is currently pursuing MBA from IIM Bangalore. And he also serves as a chief coordinator at ICON, which is a consulting club. So he completed his BTech in communication and computer engineering from the L&M Institute of Information Technology, where he ranked among the top 3 students of his batch. And he has over 3 years of experience at CS Associates and has recently worked as a summer associate in Bain & Company, where he earned a pre-placement offer as well, so which is a truly wonderful achievement again. We are also joined by our proud alumnus, Mr. Shreyas Shastri, who is also currently pursuing his MBA at IIM Bangalore. And he completed his BTech in Electronics and Communication Engineering from NIT Bhopal and has nearly 4 years of experience as a um, professional experience at Accenture as a senior analyst. He's also been selected as a summer intern at EY Parthenon, which is another remarkable milestone. So it's truly special to have both of you here, sir, with Mr. Tapesh leading the session, Mr. Shesh, our alumnus, joining us for this interaction. So without any further delay, let's get started. Over to you, Tapesh, sir.
Thank you so much, guys, for the introduction. Really excited to be part of this session. Yeah, I'll just share my screen once and let me know when it is visible.
Yeah, it's visible, Tapish.
Can we see the presentation view?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So as I was mentioning, thank you so much, guys, for the warm welcome. Really excited to be part of this workshop. Thank you, Shreyas, and I think Ujjwal also for organizing this. As a part of this workshop, what we're going to do is this is a very basic workshop where we're going to understand how does a case interview looks like, and that's why it's named Case Interview 101 Workshop. This is your first step towards consulting and beyond. As a part of the agenda, we are going to discuss 4 broad things. First, how does a case interview looks like? Because for many of us, it's an alien concept. When I was also part of my UG, I did not know much about what is a what does a case interview looks like, what are the different elements of it, etc., etc. So we'll try to touch base upon what are the case interviews, what are some of the example cases which are asked, what are some of the guesstimates which are there. Then we'll also discuss a few case types of like which are pretty standard. And then after that, we'll discuss a general interview flow of how does a case interview look like if you get to, interview for any of the firms. Then we'll also solve a case, which is going to be pretty basic. It's not something which is very fancy, but it's going to be pretty basic in terms of its understanding. Just wanted to give an essence of how does a real life case looks like. Then we're going to do general tips and tricks, and finally, we're going to follow by Q&A. One thing that I want to caveat before we begin the session is that some of the things might not be relevant um, straight away to a UG college compared to an MBA college, because the expectations and the things that they expect out of the students of MBA is pretty different from what they expect out of UG. So I'll try to nuance wherever possible, but this deck was mainly curated for the MBA students, but then the basic concept remains the same. And then we can stop for Q&A if there's any. Okay, so should we begin? Okay. Okay. So we'll first start with case interview overview. So before we understand what does a case interview look like, I want you to understand why case interviews are asked. And these are primarily asked to help us test our problem-solving ability under real consulting pressure. Now, generally in consulting, what happens is that you are given a problem statement and you have to do a case or project around it and try to help with some recommendation. So this case interview is a real life simulation of what really happens in a consulting job. So you'll be given a problem statement, you have to provide recommendations, and after that you'll have to, before providing the recommendations, you have to do quantitative and qualitative analysis, give a root cause analysis to understand what is the problem and accordingly guide the recommendations. So this evaluates your thinking process, strategic decision making, prioritization skills. So it is a real life simulation of what a real consulting job looks like. Now, how does the business case looks like? So it is generally a real life consulting project that interviewer might have personally worked on, or it can be a fictional case problem as well. There's generally a 3 to 5 line problem statement after which the floor is open for discussion and you provide an initial analysis, root cause identification, and then you will basically provide recommendation. Uh, Now in the follow-up discussion, we'll discuss what are the different type of problem statements that we can encounter, etc. But generally, this is the essence of a business case. Now, how does an interview look like? So now here I want to add a nuance of how is it different from a UG versus an MBA college? In an MBA college, generally the major discussion is focused on the case, which is more than 90% of the interview. So you generally go into the interview, you are given a problem statement and then you solve the case. So that is majorly 20 to 25 minutes. And the remaining 5 minute or 10 minute is the window for just like resume based questions. However, in UG, the split is kind of 50-50. You're evenly asked questions from your resume, which they do to judge your background, motivation, culture fit, etc. But then there will also be an element of case. I remember when I was interviewing for ZS, they had 2 rounds of interviews. The first, which was purely case based, where we were given a case we had to solve in an hour. And then after that, an interviewer came and with whom we had to discuss. And then the second round was the culture fit round. Now, here for UG, there might be a possibility that you're given a case prior to, let's say, the interview. You will be given 1 hour to solve it. You need to submit a solution, and then the interviews will be scheduled after that. But the essence of case solving remains pretty much the same. The way you approach the problem remains the same. The way you should come up with root cause analysis, recommendation, everything remains the same. Structure can be different. Then will come the methodology part, which is something that we'll detail out in follow-up slides, so we can skip for now. If I move to the next slide now, yeah. So just 1 second. Yeah, okay. So now in terms of the guesstimates, now guesstimates are kind of mini cases only, and I think this is something you must be familiar with at some level. So guesstimate can be as simple as number of McDonald outlets in GK, which is the area in Delhi, or maybe the number of cigarettes smoked by Indians annually. So these are more abstract, open-ended questions. These are generally asked to test your comfort with numbers through quick arithmetic and logical reasoning. Very important thing over here is that you should have the capability to assess how fast you can estimate the numbers and accordingly um, give like near about accurate number to the interviewer. Now, guesstimates can be generally of 2 types. One is the real life examples like market sizing or demand estimation. So let's say number of cigarettes smoked annually. So let's say if there is a firm who, like example के तौर पे ITC. ITC is a firm, right? So ITC wants to evaluate how much cigarettes that they can sell annually to Indians. So number of cigarettes smoked annually. And then it can be very unconventional as well, which can be like number of liters of paint required to do paint Eiffel Tower. You will be never doing that, but it's just to help you gauge that how well and logical you can act in an abstract situation as well. Now, how do we prepare for it? And the preparation for guesstimates and cases remain pretty standard. You should practice, make sure that your equation is MECE. Now, this MECE word is something which is very important, which is mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. It is very important to break down the problem at different levels in order to ensure that none of the parameter is missing. And then we can use 2 type of approaches. One is the top down and bottom up. Top down generally means that we start at, let's say, India population, and then we break down like by income levels, age, etc. So you start at a top level and then come at bottom, and bottom up is completely reverse of that. Then there is another approach which is called demand approach and supply approach. For example, let's say you want to understand how many burgers a outlet can sell in a day. So there can be 2 aspects to it. One, from a demand side, in order to understand how many people are visiting the outlet. So that is one aspect to it, where you start with the area population, understand the income levels, then understand the age group, then understand what is the penetration across the age groups. And second can be supply side problem. And that is more relevant in a burger case, because let's say you come up that, there are 10,000 people in the area who wants to have a burger, but our restaurant might not have the capacity to, service those 10,000 people. So there comes a supply side approach, where how many tables do we have, how many staff do we have, how many people are working in order to create those burgers, and then estimate that how many burgers we can sell annually. And then obviously you should know basic stats like population, demographics, and then you should also sanity check your final answer. It is very important here to take estimations. Let's say India population is 1.4. You should start with taking, let's say, 1.5, or if the number is coming out to be 41 point something, you should, near about do it to, let's say, 40. So it is very important to take smart estimations in this case in order to ensure that you are able to solve it quickly. Okay. Now we'll move on to the next slide. Yeah, before we move on, yeah, maybe we can cover this as well. So generally, case interviews largely standard across all the firms. Now, let's say I'll give an example of ZS only. So ZS what was given was a case, and then we were given 1 hour to solve it. But after that, when the discussion was conducted, it was roughly conducted in the same manner of what is visible on the screen. We generally started with the case introduction again. He explained the case to me. I explained my understanding of the case. We aligned on the business objective. What are the target metrics? What are the constraints, etc. After that, I was given I had already solved the case at that time. So I was then given few minutes to structure my thoughts. And after that, I had to go question by question in order to list down what was my thinking or approach in order to solve that case. So then you basically have a BC framework where that covers all the possible scenarios. A very important thing in case interviews is the structure. Honestly, nobody as an interviewer is here to judge that whether you are able to solve the case or not. Solving of the case, and Shreyas can also add in here, but solving of the case is just like 5% of it. The 90 to 95% of it is how clearly you can communicate your thoughts and how structured your thoughts are. So that is really important. Then comes the analysis part, where we can see that, you should focus on 80 20% of the things that solve 80% of the problem. That is called the Pareto principle, which is 80-20 rule. Because generally what happens in these cases, we digress on something which is not really important for us to solve. So it is very important that you focus on the major parts which can solve 80% of the problem. You should then start to develop some of the hypotheses. Let's say it's a profitability case, and you understand that the revenues have gone down, which we'll do it in detail in this session. So then you will have to understand what exactly is driving that revenue down. And to exactly understand what is driving that revenue down, you should start with some kind of hypothesis that my thinking is that can be one of the reasons, but then ask for some data or some survey that has been conducted in order to understand that in order to understand that what is the hypothesis or what are the analysis that can be conducted. After that, obviously, there is summary and recommendation, where you have to provide recommendations in or based on your findings. It should be 2-3 supporting insights coming from the case. It is very important to break recommendations also into two parts. One is short term and second is long term. Again, from a structure perspective, because some recommendations is something that the company might not be able to implement straight out of the loop, right? So they will need some time. So those basically classify as long term actions. And then there are short term actions, which is the easy wins that company can do. And then finally, obviously, this is pretty standard across all the interviews, across all the domains, across everything. The questions for the interviewer, where he should ask questions around the firm, around his experience, in order to understand that, in order to just show that you are interested in the firm, and basically you are having a culture fit mindset. So that is an overall view of how does a case interview looks like, why is a case interview conducted, what is a guesstimate. Now, after this, we'll deep dive into the major 4 types of business cases that are generally asked. So before we deep dive there, are there any questions? Okay, I think we can then move forward. Is there any question? I think there is someone on unmute. Okay, cool. I think Rishabh is unmuted. Is there any question?
Sir, actually, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, talking about guesstimates, matlab, how do we know, how do we have to take the approximation of the question? Like, we don't have any information about the data. So, how to approximate them?
Correct. So generally, let's say there can be two scenarios to it, and that's a good question. Let's say, see, some of the basic details you should definitely know as it relates to population. What is India's population? What is your hometown population? Or let's say, what is Bhopal's population? That is something you should definitely know. Then you should have some understanding of how does the sex ratio looks like 50% male, 50% female. Then what does the income bracket looks like? How does the rural urban split, which is generally 70-30 in the favor of rural? So these are the basic stats you definitely know. But let's say if you don't know any stat or something, but you still have an approach in mind. So the best way to do it is assume that let us assume that there is an X number which is there. Let's say you don't know India's population. So assume that to be X, solve the entire guesstimate and give the answer in X, saying that after all the calculation, my understanding is that the size of the market is 0.02x, and X is something I'm not sure of, but we can assume we can use external sources to get a value of X. So that is something that you should go about.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. So now we'll focus on the four major business type cases. Based on my discussion, I think profitability and cost reduction is something which is relevant here for the audience. But I'll just touch base on all the type of cases, but specifically focus on what is meant by profitability and cost reduction. If I remember vividly, my interview in ZS was also mainly a profitability case only. Pretty different of what is asked in an MBA school, but still in ZS and in UG generally, the only difference in the problem statement is that it is more data heavy. They are more here to check your analytical capabilities versus the business sense. That is the fundamental difference between the expectations that they have. Generally, those cases in UG are a bit longer because they have a problem statement and then they have 4 or 3 questions following up to it. So it is very important for you to understand that don't treat it or don't, bind yourself in any particular case type. It like treat it as a DILR set, which you have all solved or must have solved sometime during your UG journey. So treat it to be a DILR set and accordingly act, right? So treat it to be a data interpretation problem and then try to solve it. But then what does profitability stands for? Profitability is simple. Let's say your client is a toy manufacturer who is kind of facing declining profits. So that is something which profitability stands for. So now you have to analyze, since I'm a toy manufacturer, why am I facing a decline in profits? Now you all know that profit is a function of two things. One is revenue and second is cost. Now, if the profit is declining, there can be 3 scenarios to it, right? One is revenue is declining, second is cost is increasing, or third is both are happening at the same time. So now the first question becomes like, where should I deep dive into? Should I first analyze the revenue part? Should I first analyze the cost part? Or should I do it like one after the other? Now, revenue part is something that we discuss from customer journey perspective. Now, why do I say customer journey and what exactly customer journey means here is, let's say you understand that, the revenue is declining and revenue is primarily declining because the number of customers coming to, let's say, our stores or come like the number of customers buying toys from us has declined. Now, if the number of customers have declined, there is some issue at our end, which we need to identify why customers are not coming to us. Maybe there is some internal issue or there can be some external issue. Internal issue can be maybe the need of our toys is reduced, or maybe the awareness has reduced, or maybe the accessibility. Accessibility in the sense maybe the number of stores have reduced, or the website through which the people were ordering toys have reduced. Then during their experience while they were purchasing our toys from, let's say, a website or from a store, there has been some issue in the experience aspect. Or when I say experience aspect, it can be product quality, it can be staff, it can be space, it can be smell, anything. It can be very basic. And then finally comes the post purchase aspect, which can be like product quality, returns, exchange, loyalty programs, etc. When you look from a cost perspective, it is generally divided into two parts. First is the variable cost and second is the fixed cost. Now, fixed cost is generally including the setup cost or something that does not change with respect to the output. Variable cost is something that change with respect to the output. Now, apart from the basic understanding of what does the revenue looks like, cost looks like, you should also understand what is the market situation. Are we the only company who is facing some decline, or is it a generally industry-wide issue? Let's say if it is a general industry-wide issue, there can be aspects to it like we haven't done anything wrong, but let's say there was a government policy change because of which all of us are suffering. You should also think about pricing, like the example I gave was on the unit aspect, but you should also think about pricing. That can I increase the price? But you know that if I increase the price, then there will be a decrease in the demand, right? So you should think about that aspect as well. Then another important aspect is the competitor aspect. That how does the competitor landscape look like? Just 1 second, guys. Yeah. So how does the competitive landscape look like? How does the channel look like? So all of the things you should analyze. Then comes the market entry angle, and this is something I can quickly touch base on. Market entry is simple. Let's say there's a firm who is currently having their business in US and they want to enter India market. So how they should enter India market? Now, market entry is something that you will be not evaluated during your UG for sure. So, but you should have an understanding because it can also be a profitability case and can turn into a market entry case. So you should have an understanding of why should a firm enter the market. So what is their objective? Now, in order to enter, then the market should be attractive enough. They should have financial and operational feasibility. And apart from that, they should also think about if they want to enter, then how should they enter? Should they do they set up their own operations or partner with some other firm? So that's on the two business cases. Then comes the growth strategy and pricing. So I will not deep dive further into this in very detail, but like growth strategy is simple. Let's say there's a firm who is facing stagnated growth for the last 2 years. So how should they grow? Now, in order to grow, it's very intuitive, right? You can either enter a new geography, or you can enter into a new customer segment, or you can enter into a new product. These are the major three avenues through which you can facilitate growth. And then accordingly, you will provide the recommendations. And from a pricing perspective as well, there can be three types of pricing. One is the cost-based pricing, which is simply you add your cost and then add a margin to it, and then whatever price comes, you price the market. Then comes competitor-based pricing. You look at your competitor. Generally, what happens in airlines industry, you look at the competitors, price your product accordingly, and then move ahead with that. And third is the value-based pricing, which is a very niche pricing, which is generally in experiential goods. Let's say you want to price an amusement park. So you will look at how much a person is willing to pay for entertainment-based activities for 1 hour, and accordingly, you will try to price your amusement park pricing. So there are generally three types of pricing. Cost and competitor is generally used. Value based is generally for niche goods, which are not very popular or day to day. So that's on the case type. Before we move on, like after this, we'll do a case and I'll try to tell you how does the case works. But before we move on to that, are there any questions?
Yeah, Tapish, I have one question on behalf of all UG guys. So often what happens is we stuck in midway while classifying a type of case, whether it is a profitability case, a growth case, or market entry case. Like we presume that it will be a profitability case, but often we get stuck in midway while solving it. So is there any thumb rule or something which you should give us? That's how we should classify it.
I think your voice was cutting. Can you like provide the question again, please?
No, I'm not audible.
I think there's some disturbance.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, but there is someone else also audible who, and because of it, there's disturbance coming. Yeah. Yeah, Kushagra, go ahead.
Yeah. So my question was, like candidates often struggle to correctly classify a problem, like whether it is a market entry case or a growth case or any sort of case. Like what we do is like we first assume that it will be a profitability case, but when we start solving it, we get stuck in midway. That, oh no, it's not a profitability case. So is there any thumb rule or is there any are there any tips from you that we should keep in mind while classifying the cases before solving it?
So I think one of the very important things over here is to understand the objective. And that is something that should be a first question. That, what is the objective? Why are we solving the case? Or what is the objective of the client? Now, when the answer of the objective is given to you, it will be very clear in order to understand that where does the case wants to go. So basically, let's say if the person says, the objective is to just grow our profitability or grow our current business. So that's a profitability case. But let's say if the interviewer says that, our objective is to enter a new market or maybe, look at growth avenues. So then in those cases, the entire case or the interview moves in a different direction. So the first question that you should ask your interviewer is what is the objective of the client? And that will basically clarify a lot of things for you.
Okay. Okay. Moving on, like there's one more question. So, like as a UG guys, like we are intimidated by financial concepts like PNL, unit economics, and M&A. So, like how much depth of finance or economics knowledge is actually required to perform well in these case interviews or mini guesstimates interviews?
So for many guesstimates, no, and not any kind of financial knowledge is required. For cases, very basic financial knowledge is required, which is something which I showed, like profit is a function of revenue and cost. What is gross margin? What is net margins? What is the revenue per customer? What is the profit per customer? That is the only thing we should focus on. Moving into M&A aspect, valuation or present value, net present value, something that is not concerned at all. So pretty basic knowledge is required. And also just one more thing, let's say in anywhere you feel that you're not familiar with the concept or you're not familiar with the industry, you should ask the interviewer himself, telling, this is the first time I'm experiencing this industry, or this is the first time I'm, understanding or solving these cases using this logic. So that interviewer will only nudge you and tell you that, how can you solve the problem. But you can't ask direct questions, but obviously you can take help of the interviewer.
Yeah. We should move forward.
Okay. So guys, let's do a case. So the case is that your client is an Indian sweet manufacturer who is facing a decline in profits. He wants your help and understand that how will you proceed. So before we begin with the case, I just want to understand that after reading this problem statement, are there any questions that are coming in your mind that we should ask the interviewer before we start solving the case?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sir, I think we can ask that either the manufacturer is a wholesaler or a retailer.
Okay, that's a fair question. Anything else?
I would ask the interviewer
And
where it is located and what's the population is targeting.
Got it. That is
and one
that
more
is again a good
question, like
question. Yeah,
which type of sweets he's producing, like packed sweets like chocolates or
makes sense.
daily to use
Makes
sweets
sense.
like laddu and all.
Correct. Correct. That's also a valid question. So I think all the three questions are pretty valid, and like you guys are nailing it. But generally, what we ask, and like those three questions are also part of it. And generally, what I follow is like a OTG 3CP approach. So O here is your objective. T here is your timeline. G is something what one of the person mentioned is the geography. Then comes CCP, which is company, customer, competitor, and product. So these are the 7 to 8 questions. If it is already not present in the problem statement, then you can ask these questions. Now, and those include the 3 questions which our friends mentioned. So first question is like, what is the reduction in profit and what is the time frame, to understand what is the scale of the problem. So we got an answer that profits have reduced by 20% in the last 2 to 3 months. Then comes the objective part, which Kushagar was mentioning. So we want to just identify the problem and offer recommendations, no particular targets in mind. So that tells us, the entire case will focus on understanding the root cause and then offering the recommendation. Then comes the geography aspect, which one of the person mentioned right now. So the client is selling the products all over India. So that is important thing. Then comes the product aspect, which one other person again mentioned, that what is the product. So that makes our understanding clear that there is only one product and toffees that come wrapped. So it's a commodity based product, that 1 rupee or 2 rupee toffee which is there. Then comes the another question which one of the person mentioned was like, are we the manufacturer or distributor or something? So it is told to us that our client is the manufacturer and we sell it to retailers. Now, an additional information given over here is that retailers can be of 3 types: large, medium, and small. And then finally comes the last aspect, which is around the competitor landscape, that is it a company specific issue or an industry specific issue, because our approach to solving it changes. So then we got to know that it is a company specific issue. Does this question make sense? And obviously there can be more questions to it, but these questions kind of give you an initial understanding of how should you go about start thinking about the problem statement and etc. Okay. So now we'll apply the framework, which is simple. So as I mentioned, that profits is a function of revenue and cost. Either revenue can be decreased or cost can be increased, or both can happen at the same time. So generally we see that here the revenues are decreased and costs have remained pretty much the same. Now, a very simple math behind this is, what is revenue? Revenue is units into price. Maybe units have decreased or price have decreased, right? So if we see that price, there has been no change in the price, but the number of units have decreased. Now, one question that generally comes in the mind is that if the number of units have decreased and we are serving the entire India, is this problem specific to one geography or is it a pan-India problem? And then we got to know that, this problem is specific, not specific to any market. It is a pan-India problem. So this gives you a preface that now we need to understand, given the number of units have reduced. So now we need to understand why the number of units have reduced. Now, number of units have reduced. What does that mean? It means that the number of customers coming to us has reduced. Make sense? So now we'll move on to the next aspect, which is we'll understand what is the number of units and how can we divide it. So as I mentioned, you should be MECE. So I think one person mentioned that, are we the distributors or something? We are the manufacturers, but there can be some issue that can happen at the distribution end as well. And this entire thing of mapping out into production, distribution, and customer is called a value chain approach. So what does this mean? Maybe there is some issue at the production level because of which our product quality has gone down. Maybe our supply has gone down, or something has happened on the production end because of which we are not able to cater to the customers. But once we move ahead, let's say the production issue looks fine, then we move ahead to understand the distribution aspect. Maybe our production is fine, but there is some issue at the distributor ends because of which we are not able to cater to the customers. And let's say the distribution is also fine, then there is some issue at the customer end because of which they are not preferring a product. So how does the interview looks like? So we basically tell them, the units can be divided into 3 broad categories. One, there can be a production issue. The second, there can be a distribution issue, and third can be a customer pull issue. So then I will ask the interviewer saying that, based on your understanding, have we seen that there is any of the issues in any of these domains? Now the interviewer can do 2 things. He can either tell you that where is the issue and you can deep dive into that, or maybe he can tell you that let's deep dive one by one into everything and let's see where the issue lies. So let's say we deep dive into the production issue. So in production, there can be multiple aspects to it. Maybe our raw material quality have reduced. Maybe there is some issue at the manufacturing end. Maybe the efficiency of labor, efficiency of our machines have reduced. Then there is some issue at the transportation end. And there is some issue at the regulatory end because of which our production is not enough. Maybe there is some government policy changes because of which, we are not able to run our factory. Maybe there is some ban or something because of which there is a supply issue that's happening. But then during a discussion, we got to know that there's no production issue. So then we'll move on to the customer pull issue. Now, customer pull issue can be, again, 2-3 things. One is like the overall market has dropped. So overall market drop means that overall the sweet market has dropped. That is one aspect to it. Generally, people are not preferring sweets. Then there can be an industry-wide issue, but this is something that you have already negated, which is that people are already selling toffees. It's just that our company toffees are not being sold. And then there can be a client-specific issue, which is the customer is specifically not preferring our client's toffee, which is again not the case, which we got from the discussion. So then we move on to the distribution issue. Now within the distribution issue, there can be 3 aspects to it. One, there can be some issue from production to distributor. Then there can be some issue from distributor to retailer. And then there can be some issue from retailer to customer. At any of the stage, issue can happen. Because generally what we see is distribution is a broad bucket. If we try to target directly saying that, there can be a laundry list of, let's say, 5 issues, we won't be able to arrive at the exact solution. And then this also gives a structure to the communication. Then we got to know that the issue mainly lies in the retailer to customer aspect. Now, as already discussed above, there were 3 kinds of retailers: large, medium, and small. So the first thing that should come to your mind is, across all the retailers, where is the issue that is coming? Is it the large ones? Is it the medium ones? Is it the small ones? So then based on the discussion, we got to know that the issue is majorly in the small ones. Now issues can be of 2 types. One is the financial issue and second is the non-financial issue. Financial issue mainly is, let's say, the distribution margin or the retailer margins that they're getting are low, because of which they are kind of seeing that, it's better to sell the competitor toffee, right? And there can be non-financial issues as well. Non-financial issues can be, let's say, there is no availability. The availability, like there is a fluctuating availability of our toffees from the production end, or there can be storage issues, there can be accessibility issues, that our toffees are not, like we don't have enough distributors in order to service the retailers. Now, generally what I've seen in UG cases is the focus is mainly on numbers. So there is highly likely that the case moves in the financial direction. However, in this case, we moved into a non-financial direction. So we understood that there is an accessibility issue. Sorry. So now accessibility is like the shopkeeper or the retailer is not able to access our toffees. So we got to know that there can be 3 aspects to it. One, there can be the placement of container. Maybe the way containers are placed on a store, our toffee container is very far from him, because of which he is not preferring to give our toffee. The second is the type of container. Maybe it's not very easy in terms of the packaging or shape of the container for him to use and give our toffees, because you understand, right? These are 1 rupee, 2 rupee toffees, and these small retailers are kind of those small departmental stores, or let's say pawn shops, where let's say this 1 rupee, 2 rupee thing becomes the toffee thing. So then in those cases, they work on a limited time. They want to quickly give toffee. So there can be some issue with the type of the container. And finally comes the packaging. So there can be some issue with the packaging of the toffee, because of which they are not able to, give our toffees compared to the competitor toffee. And what we saw is that the issue was with the type of the container. So this is how you need to analyze. Now the issue here is not important, and obviously we'll think that there was such a small issue, but we make a big case out of it. But generally these things happen. Generally the issue is very small, but the interviewer again here is not to check that whether you are able to arrive at the root cause, but he is here to check to understand that were you able to think all the situations, all the scenarios, and provide a messy approach to it. So what was the root cause? You observed that the change in the container shape has made it difficult for shopkeepers to access our toffee, which led to decline in revenues and overall profit. And then the recommendations are pretty standard. We can introduce packaging solutions like small or running packets, or offer packaging tips to retailers, and enhance our customer engagement with their toffees. So that is how we go about solving a case. It is very important to keep the interviewer engaging. It is very important to think all the possible scenarios. And then it is also very important to incorporate data and numbers wherever possible. Given the setting right now, we can obviously can't account for the numbers and everything, because it's very difficult to show you and solve it. But then it is very important, because you'll be given a loads of information, especially in ZS, if you are, because Ujjwal told me that ZS is coming, let's say tomorrow or day after. In ZS, you will be given a lot of data points. So you will have to do a thorough analysis to understand where do we exactly target, which customers do we target, or whatever the problem statement is. So that's about it. Now, before we move on to the general tips and tricks section, are there any questions?
So,
Okay.
sir,
Yeah.
I had one question. So, in our
Yeah, I think you're not
college
audible.
has its own
Shreyas?
casebook.
Yeah, I
Some of
think
the
you're
top,
not audible. Is it my network, Shreyas, or is he in generally not audible?
He's generally not on.
Okay.
If there is an issue, you can type in chat also. We'll see that.
Yeah.
yeah. So, my question was in our college. So, sir, now am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Please go ahead.
Sir, am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. So, sir, my question was in our college while preparing for case interviews, we usually prefer to top books available out there in the market. Like, has its own casebook and some outside the book. So, however, these casebooks present a wide variety of advanced problems, which is not required for UGs. So, could you share which type of cases a UG student should primarily focus on, while referring to those casebooks?
That's a good question. I think in terms of the focus of the casebook, you should. So generally, I can talk about Bangalore book, and then you can also go through similar approach in Ahmedabad and FMS casebooks, and then you can also look at the UG casebooks of, let's say, SRCC or some colleges. But try to find cases which are not very complex, that does not require a lot of business understanding, and are number heavy. So in I am Bangalore's casebook, you will see that there are all the cases which have numbers are marked by N. So as I mentioned, in UG, the expectation is not about understanding the business context. It is having the analytical capability. So you should focus on only those cases which are numerically heavy and does not require a lot of business concepts.
Sure.
And
Move
then
on.
from a guesstimate standpoint, those remain pretty standard across UG and PG. So you can go through any of the casebooks to understand it simpler, to understand the guesstimates. Now, once you solve, let's say 10 to 15 guesstimates, you will understand that, solving guesstimates is pretty standard and there is no, not much change that we can do. So that is something that will come after, let's say 10, 15 guesstimates. So then after that, you'll be pretty comfortable.
So we had one question in chat as well. Does an MBA degree make you better at scaling startups or existing companies? So I guess it is irrelevant. You can answer it too.
I think we can first complete with the presentation and then I can take any general questions which are there. Okay.
Yeah, sure, sir. We should move on.
Yeah, I think there's just one more slide that is left. So basically, key tips and tricks, obviously, first, before the interview and during the interview. Before the interview, you should definitely solve cases with your batchmates, seniors, and buddies. It is very important because when you're solving a case, there can be multiple approaches to it, right? So it is very important to not just solve in silos, but as a group. Again, the second aspect might not be very relevant for UG, but then you should also be aware a bit about the value chain. What are the revenue and cost drivers for all the industries? Let's say if you have given a hospitality industry or maybe a airlines industry, you should, before solving, let's say, profitability case, which is divided into revenue and cost, you should first understand, what is driving the revenue and what is driving the cost. That is the fundamental aspect to it, right? So that is very important. So you should have some understanding and you can refer casebooks for that. Then you should obviously stay up to current events. You should know about the company. You should know about what are the major projects. Fourth point is obviously what you have discussed, that you should be very fluent in your approximations, rounding smartly, and you should always speak your steps aloud because it's always important to keep the interviewer engaging. So while you're solving the guesstimate, you should walk him through the approach And uske baad you should tell ki now I can take some time to calculate. It's not something that you should take 15 minutes and then solving, and then after those 15 minutes telling just one number. And then fifth point is not relevant because relationship management and buddies is not a thing in UG. During the interview, you should have four major things. One is obviously you should be polite. You should acknowledge your mistakes. I think one thing which is very important is, let's say you have taken a wrong approach and you have realized, or let's say interviewer have realized or made you realize that, this is the wrong approach. You should definitely acknowledge that, yeah, thank you for the feedback. I can rephrase or think about an alternative approach. So the feedback aspect is the most important thing in an interview, especially in a case interview. Then comes the participatory aspect, where what I have already mentioned, that you should promote dialogue, avoid one-way conversations, try to keep the interviewer as engaging as possible in order to listing down your approach or walking them through your approach, etc. Then you should be very predictable. Before, let's say, we are dividing the problem into revenue and cost and deep diving further, you should take a step back and wahin par hi understand that should I deep dive into the revenue aspect or should I deep dive into the cost aspect. Deep diving into both before asking will kind of waste your time and also your thinking. So you should plan early. You should tell them, this is the approach, these are the four aspects, where should I deep dive? And then obviously you should deliver clear and structured notes, balance perfection with practicality and use data-based approach. Now, there are a few tools that you can use. Obviously, Pareto principle is something we've already discussed. MISI framework is already we have discussed. Formula-based approach, again, take a burger example, number of tables into occupancy, into the average billing amount, into, let's say, what is the average duration that the person is sitting. So that is how you divide the entire thing into a formula-based approach. Then process mapping is something that we discussed during the distributor example, where you move from company to distributor to retailer, retailer to customer. And data center analysis is again very important, where you should incorporate it as much data as possible and as much critical thinking as possible. So these are the general tips and tricks that as it relates to case interview. Now we'll stop for any questions as it relates to MBA, consulting, ZS, post consulting, everything. So I think we can stop share, and Shreyas, you can also pitch in for any kind of questions if there are any. I think we have 11 minutes left, so we can utilize that time.
Yeah. So, sir, I guess you've covered already everything, like it is required for a UG guy to prepare for a case competition or a case interview or guesstimate interview, or like if they want to explore the field of consulting or domain of consulting. So I just want to, apart from all the knowledge which you have transferred to us, so you to throw a light on how should a guy like prepare a resume to maximize their chances. Like what are the key points and what are the keywords which should be present in the resume to maximize their chances in the interview or while shortlisting.
Shreyas, do you want to take this up or should I take this up?
No, you take this up.
So see, resume, I don't know how to answer this in like a minute or so. It's a
Right.
big thing. In MBA colleges, the resume process spans across a month. So it's not something which is like a 1 day thing or 2 day thing.
It's
One
a
thing you
crudely
should
if you want
definitely
to.
one thing you should definitely focus on is having all elements in your resume, and that is all consulting is all about. Generally you will see that all-rounded personalities generally make into consulting, so you should definitely focus on your academics. You should definitely focus on the work you do in your organizations or whichever organization you move into. That is another aspect. Then the third aspect is you should definitely have a one or two POR. Generally what I have seen in UG and the culture, I don't know what's the culture in your college, but in my college, the culture was seniors used to come and they used to say that, all of this is crap, just focus on PORs, everything, etc., etc. I generally feel that consulting is a replica of balance and you should have all the elements. Academics is one, PORs is one, extracurriculars is one. You should also have a few awards and achievements, a few competitions, let's say in sports, or let's say in business case competitions. There are a lot of MBA colleges who are doing these case competitions regularly. Try to take part in that. Try to have one or two case competitions where you could, enter into finals to understand what is the thinking or how does the thinking looks like. You will hear from judges there. So that will give you a perspective. So one from a resume standpoint, you should have all-rounded personality. On your second question, in terms of what words should we have or what keywords should we have, generally in big consulting firms, there are some hard filters that are applied, and in UG and PG both, in terms of the academics, in terms of again what are things I mentioned. But after that, they generally read resumes. There is no AI-based shortlisting in these firms generally, but obviously they're not going to read 500 or 600 resumes. They're going to read, let's say, 100 resumes. So first, to get in those 100 resumes, you should have all-rounded personality, and then after that, it's all based on the profile. That's a short answer to a long thing.
And just to add to this, if someone is reading your resume, they should have at least like they should not put much effort. Okay, so each of your point should be in a structure. So you should mention that like what you did, how you did it, and what impact you created from it. So it shows like it's a very crisp summary of whatever work you have done, right?
Correct.
So and each point should be of similar structure so that the person who is reading your resume, they put like little to no efforts while reading it.
Yep. Absolutely right. I think we can take one question that was there in the chat. I think
Yes.
there is like, does a startup degree make you better at scaling your existing companies? I will answer. The answer is twofold, honestly. See, UG gives you a lot of skills, but then what an MBA degree gives you is a professional experience of how do we interact with a diverse set of group. Generally, what happens in UG colleges is that you are interacting with all the people who have just like passed out of 12th or something. In PG or in MBA, there will be, you know, there will be some CAs, there will be doctors, there will be engineers, and majority of them are engineers, but then they'll be from commerce background, science background, across different backgrounds. So it gives you a lot of connects. It gives you a lot of perspective in terms of the experience it gives you, in terms of the conversations you have. Because generally, when we think from a problem statement or when we think as a group in for a problem statement, we generally think from a one thinking mindset because you have similar background. But UG colleges, sorry, MBA colleges generally gives you the diverse backgrounds. Group projects is a thing in MBA colleges. In every subject, you'll be doing a group project. So you understand how to build, how to work in a team, how to build teams around that. That's a very important aspect when it's related to team building. And then obviously the post MBA part of it, where you are open to a network of people. Let's say you contacted Shreyas, right? Because he was an alumni of your college. He contacted me. So the entire ecosystem is there, right? So it is very important to be in that ecosystem in order to scale things. So let's say if you want to raise a funding, you might see that, there is a alumni of, let's say, a big MBA college sitting as a partner in that VC firm. So how difficult it would be, to reach out that VC fund for, let's say, funding. So it gives you a lot of resources. And that is why it says that, post MBA degree, scaling startups is easier. And there are a lot of opportunities during MBA as well. We have our own incubation center at IIM Bangalore. Similar things happen at Ahmedabad, Calcutta, and similar colleges. So all of these things gives you a lot of opportunities. Every week or so, there is an industry leader that is visiting the campus. Generally, we don't go, but you can go if you have an interest into a particular industry and if you want to go. So you can go have a conversation with them, understand what they're working on. Is there any help that they can do? So MBA is all about network, and that network takes you a long way.
So
I have a doubt.
Yeah, go ahead. Can you also tell your
Right.
name when you are asking doubts? It's better for.
Sorry, I'm Tirish Rasa.
Okay.
Right. So my doubt is like I have read multiple interview transcripts, right, from casebooks. But when it comes to, like interview, like the real interview, you have to think immediately, right? So how do we practice for that? Immediately structuring our thoughts and all that.
That's a very good question. Very, very good question. I would say there are two aspects to it. One, practice. You should definitely practice more than 100, 150. Well, now, again, the number might be big from a PG perspective, but then you should definitely practice a lot of cases, at least 10 to 15 or 20 cases every case type you should definitely do. That's one. Second, one thing which is importantly brought up is the interview transcripts that you're reading is an ideal scenario. And that is how generally the interviews don't work. The interviews are pretty unstructured. It is very conversational, but those transcripts or those solutions gives you a direction, gives you tools. So let's say you are reading a case, and at the time of the case, you're not able to figure out, how can I solve this? But while you're reading, after you're solved, while you're reading, you come up with a framework to understand, okay, this is something I could have applied, right? So that framework or that transcript will help you when you are really solving the case during the interview. How can you apply that framework? So let's say there is a framework called man machine method material, right? So then whenever we are talking about any process, there can be any issue related to the man. There can be any issue related to the machine which you are using. There can be any issue related to the method. This is pretty messy. But I don't expect you to get it in the first way while you're solving the case for the first time. But let's say if you've solved 10, 15 cases, you'll have that framework in mind, that I can apply this to, I can use this, right? And that is something that casebook gives you. And then practice is the key, bro.
So, just to add to this, typically from a practicing case perspective, what we do is we have groups of 2 to 3 people together, and like one will be the interviewer, one will be the interviewee, and one will be the observer. And these roles can rotate for each case. Okay, so that's how we practice, and similar structure you can also follow.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think we can take one more question. It's already.
Yeah. So if anyone has any questions, they can put up in the chat or they can ask.
And not just related to consulting यार, मतलब MBA में कैसे होता है, क्या होता है, वो भी पूछना तो पूछ सकते हो, मतलब कुछ भी पूछ सकते हो.
Hello, sir. Myself Sri Singh. Actually, I have one question. A lot of
Yeah.
people suggest that apart from targeting MBBs and Big Four, we should also focus on boutique consulting. So, what's the process to get into that, to get internship or to go into that?
Yeah. So, yeah, see, the process, I don't feel that, these firms, generally MBB, Big Four or boutique, are generally, hiring interns directly. But obviously, if you want to reach out, LinkedIn is the key. You should definitely reach out through LinkedIn, and that is the only way you can reach out, because otherwise you will not find any contacts, or otherwise you can maybe find your alumni there and then again reach out. And then that comes again back to the point of, how does a degree helps you? So that is one. But landing up interns in these firms is difficult. Second, rather than pitching it as an intern, you should pitch it as a live project, which is something you can also do it voluntary, because intern is something which is more formalized, and then given you are a student, you will also have your academic commitments and etc., right? So pitch it as a live project that I can spend, let's say, 2 hours per day or 12 hours per week for a project that you can give. And then maybe you can try reaching out through LinkedIn in the messaging of a live project, and then maybe that works. But these are the only things you can try. I think apart from that, there is not much you can do.
Okay.
Okay. Cool.
So
I think then, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry
sir.
to
So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for taking out your time and just guiding us through the prospects. So I guess we had a good time, and I guess we had you have given us all the clarity of which case and how to explore consulting field as well. So like yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks a lot to Shreyas boss and Ujjwal boss also to like cooperate and arrange a workshop or session with Icon. And on behalf of ProdCon team and whole Managed College, I would like to thank you and your team for giving us your time.
No, yeah, thank you so much, guys. We also had a great time. Feel free to reach out in case of any questions. We're more than happy to help. But yeah, hopefully you all get your dream roles in the upcoming placement season, and then have a great career ahead. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.